Welcome to Adventures in Accessibility, a podcast that explores the far reaches of disability, access, and inclusion, with your host, Emily Schumann.
Welcome back, and thanks for joining us on another episode of Adventures in Accessibility. Today's guest is Chris Brock. Chris is the managing attorney of Colorado Cross Disability Coalition's Probate Power. Chris focuses his practice in the areas of special needs planning, estate planning, and probate administration. A paraplegic since college, Chris understands firsthand the issues that come with living with a disability. He now devotes his legal practice to ensuring families and individuals with disabilities carefully plan for the future. Well, hi, Chris. Thanks so much for being our guest today. We're so pleased to have you.
Thanks for having me.
So some of our listeners might not be familiar with you and your work, so please tell us about yourself.
So I'm Chris Brock. I run Probate Power, which is a social enterprise program for the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition. CCDC, as we're known, is a disability rights nonprofit organization. It's been around since, I believe, 1990, and does a lot of disability rights advocacy and litigation in Colorado. And I run, like I said, Probate Power, which is CCDC's social enterprise. So a few years ago, 5 years ago, CCDC decided to branch out and look for a way to help fund the organization that's not just focusing on grants or people donating money to CCDC. And they started Probate Power, which is a legal program where we focus on special needs planning, estate planning, probate administration, those legal areas.
And I have a lot of questions for you about Probate Power and all of that, but right off the bat, I can't wait to ask you this question. So a little birdie told me that you have a special relationship with cereal, like breakfast cereal. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so I did an interview a while back and somebody asked me what's my favorite food, and I said my favorite food is cereal. And this person that you referred to was shocked and amazed. He had never heard this answer before. But yes, I love cereal. I have it every morning. Usually nowadays I have the healthy kind with a lot of fiber and protein and the kashi and whatnot. But yeah, it's great for breakfast. I have it for dinner sometimes, and every once in a while a late night snack as well.
Do you have a favorite, like if you're on a desert island and you can only bring one cereal, what would you bring?
It depends on the day and month that you ask. I would probably lean towards like Golden Grahams. That's like the sweet cereal I have in my cabinet right now.
Golden Grahams. That's one I don't even think about very often. Do you get into that cycle of like you get to the end of the bowl, but you still have milk left? So you put in a little more cereal, but then you put in too much cereal. So you got to put in a little bit more milk.
I've done that occasionally. Yes.
Okay, well, good. I wanted to get that out of the way because I was burning with curiosity about your cereal situation. Okay, so back to Probate Power. You told us a little bit about the organization. What are some of the practice areas that Probate Power works on?
The majority of what we do is what's called special needs planning, and that is special needs trusts, helping people get ABLE accounts, helping people get guardianships, so basically planning around helping families and individuals with disabilities plan for the future, whether that is a child with Down syndrome that just turned 18 or somebody who is on SSI and Medicaid and has an asset limit issue, and all of a sudden they win a personal injury settlement and have $100,000 they need to put somewhere in order to maintain public benefit eligibility. That's kind of the main goal of Probate Power, is to help people, individuals and families with disability plan for their future. So special needs planning is big time what we do. I also mentioned guardianship. So again, you have a family, they have an adult child who turns 18, he or she has Down syndrome, severe autism, other severe IDD, something like that, then and they're unable to make decisions for themselves and they need protection, then I help them through the court process to get guardianship or conservatorship if that is needed, to make sure that their adult children are protected for long into the future.
So you mentioned all those different scenarios where you might be involved, but I'm wondering, at what point would a potential client contact you would it be like on the individual's 18th birthday when they need that service, or should they be contacting you ahead of time? What would you say about that?
When it comes to a guardianship, conservatorship, typically, and they know that their child is going to be an adult and need this sort of service, typically the best would be to contact me I would say about 2 months before their 18th birthday. That gives me time to complete the documents, collect the necessary documentation. Credit reports are needed, IDs are needed, criminal background checks are needed, to get all this stuff together and file it with the court right around the person's 18th birthday so that we can get guardianship in place as soon as possible. In terms of the special needs trust and that sort of thing, in order to protect inheritance, that can be done really anytime. I have families that contact me right around when that child turns 18, and we do both guardianships and special needs trust and all of that all in one big package. So they're with me a lot for a few months as we do all this stuff all at the same time. But I've had families contact me when they know they have a child with Down syndrome at 2 months old, and the baby's there in my office, and we're planning her future with a special needs trust. And I've had families contact me with children in their early 70s, and mom and dad are close to 90, and it's like they want to get this stuff in place before they pass away.
Are there things that you would say people contact you thinking that you can help with that you just don't do? Is there anything you would say, don't contact us for that?
The big one for that, at least for probate power, is right now we do not assist with Medicaid or Social Security applications. That is a big one that I know a lot of families struggle with, that they really want help to make sure that is correctly applied for and correctly submitted, because there are a lot of denials that happen that probably shouldn't happen, that would be avoided if people could help with, but we just don't have the capacity to assist with that right now.
Is there an organization that you refer to that does help with that, or is that something you just kind of have to say, sorry, that's outside of our scope?
Usually I see if they can contact first their community center boards to see if there's somebody there that can help them. Then I always say, reach out to the ARC. If the child has Down syndrome, Rocky Mountain Down Syndrome Association might be able to help, or might have contacts. All of those organizations either have someone or might be able to forward a name or to that family.
As you know, the Rocky Mountain ADA Center serves 6 states. And it sounds like Probate Power and CCDC are kind of Colorado based. So I'm wondering if there are like companion organizations in some other states, or, how would you recommend people in those, other states in our region reach out for some sort of similar resources to what you offer?
That's a very good question. I'm not aware of organizations outside of Colorado. I'm so Colorado focused that I'm not intimately aware of certain organizations in certain states. But if there is need for an attorney for a guardianship or a special needs trust in Utah or something like that, most attorneys, including myself, can help contact other attorneys in other states to find somebody who can help out with that. So the lawyer world is pretty small, actually. So it's pretty, a lot of times I'll be on a listserv, and all the time I'll ask if does anyone know a special needs planning attorney in Salt Lake City, Utah, and somebody will pop up and they'll say yes, contact so and so. So if somebody is not able to find an attorney in their area, I can help them find someone.
That's great. Well, I don't think we mentioned this yet, but as is every guest on our podcast, you yourself are a person with a disability, correct? So what can you tell us about that?
That is correct. So I am a T6 paraplegic. So a fun little story, as most of these are. When I was 18 years old, I was deer hunting, and I was in a tree stand. Actually, I was up in a tree stand, and I got really lightheaded, and I ended up passing out. And I fell out of the tree stand, and I broke my back, and that's how I became a paraplegic. And that was, I was 18, and that was actually 18 years ago. So I'm now half my life has been spent in a wheelchair.
Yeah, wow, that must have been obviously a life changer. How did you, in the immediate aftermath, how did you deal with that?
It was tough, to be honest. First off, I spent 2 months in a rehab center in Cincinnati. I'm originally from Ohio, and took a lot to relearn everything. So relearning how to get dressed, how to drive a car, relearning how to operate in my kitchen, things like that you take for granted every day. You have to relearn all of that, putting a plate on a counter and, making your peanut butter and jelly sandwich, totally different perspective doing it from a wheelchair versus doing it from standing up. Mm-hmm. So it took a long time to refocus my mind and, relearn how to do all of that stuff. So I was actually a freshman in college when I got hurt. So I actually, missed a year of college while I relearned how to live in a wheelchair and learn how to drive and take care of myself. So it was a pretty rough transition, but after that first year, things got better.
Yeah, and so many of our guests with disabilities, especially physical disabilities, get into adaptive sports, and that's part of how they transition into the world of having an acquired disability. So I wonder if that applies to you as well.
It does. So I moved out here to Colorado, actually to go to law school. I moved out here in 2011, and that's really when I discovered adaptive sports. Right now, the two sports that I'm deeply involved in, one is wheelchair lacrosse, and that's probably my main sport. I play. We have a team here in Denver, so we meet when the weather's nice, that is. We meet every Sunday for practice. It's a lot of fun. It's a fantastic workout. And there are teams around the country, so we play in a national tournament every year. This year, the national tournament is actually in San Diego, which is really cool. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a great workout. What's really great about wheelchair lacrosse is that, as far as I know, we are the only adaptive sport with both disabled and non-disabled teammates. So people who are non-disabled, who are quote unquote able-bodied, they can be on a team with us, and they get in chairs, and we're allowed to have 3 able-bodied people on the court at one time, 8 people per team on the court, 3 of which can be able-bodied people. So it's really cool to have disabled and able-bodied people on the same team. It brings a lot of camaraderie. It just really makes the whole wheelchair lacrosse community really unique in that way. Also, when before COVID, I also was big into adaptive CrossFit. So Kevin Ogar, he actually owns a CrossFit gym here in Inglewood in Colorado, and he's in a wheelchair. And he was a CrossFit athlete before he got hurt. And then after he got hurt, he just kept right along. And he's a level 3 CrossFit coach, and he owns his own gym, and he's really awesome. And doing that is just a fantastic way to stay in shape and keep my shoulders and my body, in tune, because pushing the wheelchair around for 18 years can cause a lot of wear and tear on your body. And so CrossFit's a great way to keep it, in check.
That's great. Yeah, I like what you were saying about the lacrosse dynamic. Do you think that having able-bodied folks in wheelchairs, playing the sport, do you think that helps them develop a sense of sort of empathy and understanding for people who are wheelchair users?
Yes, I do believe that. Several friends of mine who are able-bodied that are on the team, I think it really opens their eyes to both our abilities and, occasionally, what we need a little help with. When we travel as a team, they get to be our service humans, or kind of like service dogs. So there are Sherpas. They get to care of some of our equipment and stuff for us. But I think it really helps them see the world through our eyes. Like, oh, there's no curb cut on this corner, yeah. So we might need help popping up onto the sidewalk here or whatever. Or, oh, well, there's stairs over here, so let's find the accessible entrance so we can push our lacrosse chairs, into the building, things like that. And it just, I think having them be a part of the team just makes it a really cool dynamic.
Well, since you had your injury when you were 18, I'd love to know more about how you learned about the Americans with Disabilities Act and kind of when in your journey that happened.
I didn't really learn. I mean, I knew nothing about the ADA before I was hurt. I probably had heard of the ADA at some point, through school or whatever. But it wasn't until after I got hurt, after I was out of the rehab center, that it was just in my everyday life that I kind of came across some challenges, and then discovered like, oh, there's this law out there to protect me and to give me some equal rights. And maybe I should learn a little bit about it so I can make sure I apply it when I need to. So if there is a classroom I can't get into, I have to, and I need to assert myself, there's a law behind it. And so I didn't learn about the ADA like specifically in terms of like having a class on it or anything like that. It was more of just naturally through living, with a disability that it kind of just came into my life.
And how do you feel like the ADA impacts your life today? And what are some of your struggles, and also, kind of the opposite side of that? What are some of the successes that you can point to?
Well, the ADA, it's a lifeline. It makes my life equal. It gives me equality with a lot of able-bodied people. It allows me to go to a concert at Red Rocks, or go to a Nuggets game or an Avalanche game. Before, I have friends that have been in wheelchairs a long time, and they say before the ADA, they would have to call a restaurant downtown to see if they were able even to get their wheelchair into the restaurant, because there was nothing that would prevent the restaurant from having stairs, to the entrance, and that was not a big deal to the restaurant. So it was really a struggle before the ADA came into place, and now, I can go and eat at mostly any restaurant there is, and go to any sporting event or concert or whatnot. It's definitely not perfect, but it really, opens the door for me to live in the community like any person that's living here, which is fantastic. As somebody who's been in a wheelchair for 18 years, there are quite a few stories, both good and bad, dealing with, accessibility issues. One of the big ones that comes to mind is that I went to a wedding in Montana a few years ago. So my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, we flew up there to Montana. I think it was to Billings. We got to, we landed, got to the airport, went to the car rental counter and got my reservation, and come to learn that the car did not have hand controls on it. So I had called 2 or 3 weeks beforehand and requested hand controls on this vehicle. I don't know if there's a glitch in the system or whatnot, but all of a sudden, no hand controls on the vehicle. And it was a Friday evening, and mechanics are closed. And this woman at the counter was just like part-time. She wasn't even the manager. So there's nothing she could do. Really, the only reason I could go anywhere was that I had somebody who could drive with me. Otherwise, if I'd been alone, I don't know what I would have done. I wouldn't have been able to drive that vehicle, So things like that kind of happen here and there. So it can be a struggle at times. That one was a big issue. And my girlfriend, she was not pleased. We weren't pleased at all. We were quite angry. Thankfully, they made up for it. I don't think I paid a dime for the rental car. I think they just gave me all the money back. But she did not too happy having to drive all over Montana for 4 days when I usually do all the driving.
Yeah. Well, and I think, gosh, the thing that's just so kind of scary is that, like you said, what would you have done if you hadn't had another person with you? And that really limits your independence. Like, either you feel like you have to always have somebody else with you, or, I don't think most people realize that there's a whole layer of consideration that you have to deal with that, the average person doesn't.
Right. That was eye-opening, to say the least. Because I've gotten rental cars before then and since then. And ever since then, triple check that hand controls are going to be on the vehicle. But yeah, I travel by myself all the time, quite often, especially before COVID. And so, I don't know what would have happened if I would have been alone at that time. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm sure other people have stories where this has happened and they have been alone.
Well, something else we get a lot of calls about, and people, are always pointing out to us is, in parking lots and accessible spaces, when there's, flower displays or cart returns or piles of snow that get piled into the access aisles. And so I'm sure you've noticed and dealt with a lot of that. And so maybe, from your perspective, you can tell our audience, why it's so important that those be left open.
Those striped spaces in between handicap accessible parking spots, they're there for a reason. And the reason is I cannot get in my vehicle if you're parked next to me, and I cannot open my door all the way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty good about maneuvering into my wheelchair as long as my car door can open all the way, I can get to my car. But if somebody's parked, 2.5 feet away from me, I'm not able to get in my car and drive away, and that has happened quite a few times to me. A few times at like grocery stores, I've had to go to the counter and say, can somebody call, the person this license plate number so that they can move their car so I can leave the grocery store. That's happened a few times. It's happened a few times at my work because unfortunately somebody maybe they just don't know what that striped space is, or they don't care and they'll drive there. And I'll have a court hearing or something, and I need to leave the office to go downtown to the courthouse. And I have a time I have to be at the courthouse. And, you can't just call the judge really and say, oh, I'm going to be 10 minutes late. And so that's been a bit of a headache when somebody's parked next to me when I have a court hearing that I have to be on time. And somebody was not exactly paying attention where they were going or just didn't care. So that's a major issue that I hope people can understand and can learn about, that, just don't park in those striped spaces.
Yeah, a headache seems like maybe the understatement of the year.
There's other words I could use for it, but let's just call it a headache.
Well, so this month the ADA is turning 31. And so I wonder, what would you hope for in terms of the future of accessibility and the ADA?
I just hope for more progress. The 31 years, there's been fantastic progress in accessibility and equality for people with disabilities, especially, under the ADA. But there are still areas that need to be fixed, need to be worked on, that a lot of times people don't see, and it's not as upfront and in your face as curb cuts or as accessibility at a hockey game. It's a lot more hidden sort of discrimination type things that could be remedied under the ADA. So I hope those things just can keep progressing over the next 10, 20, 30 years. We've come a long way, which is great, but it'd be nice to keep progressing.
And what do you wish that you would have known about accessibility when you first became disabled?
I wish I known really how to be assertive and how to use the law to my advantage. I mean, not in a rude, confronting way, but just, explaining to people that, hey, I have a right to this space. I have a right to be here just like anybody else. So just learning how to use the law to my advantage. There are things I'm sure I did not know when I was 19 years old and newly in a wheelchair, that now it comes second nature to me, that I've just learned over time that the law protects me for that. And so just, for the people out there who are newly disabled or have family members who are disabled, learning about the ADA and what your rights are is key.
And did your disability play into your decision to become a lawyer, or is that a track you were already on?
That was actually a track I was already on. I've wanted to be a lawyer probably since high school. I found it a way to help people. There's a lot of doors that open with a law degree, having an AD on the back of your name. So I always wanted to go to law school, but after I got hurt is when I really thought about focusing on civil rights in that area. I don't practice civil rights necessarily. I don't sue people under the ADA or civil rights laws or anything like that. I'm not smart enough to do that. There are much better lawyers who do that than I do. But I find the work I do helping families, protect their, disabled children's future through special needs trust and guardianship and setting up able accounts, that in a small way, makes their lives better and gives them peace of mind. And so I even though I planned to go to law school before I got hurt, I think getting hurt and becoming paralyzed really brought focus to kind of the avenue I wanted to go down.
And we've talked about this a little bit already, but I'd love to know, what are your thoughts for listeners without disabilities, that, just on accessibility or people with disabilities in general? What would you like for able-bodied or non-disabled people to know?
Really, I just want them to realize that, the ADA is about trying to give us equal opportunity, making our lives a little better, because we just want to be part of the community like anybody else. We want to be able to play lacrosse. So, hopefully, give me an outdoor hockey rink that is flat, that there is no step into, that I can get onto so I can play wheelchair lacrosse. Give me, curb cuts so I can cross the street without asking for help. My wife and I were actually in Europe for our honeymoon a few years ago. And, that was an adventure. Some places were great and some places definitely not, in terms of accessibility. So seeing that and then coming back home to the US, you definitely see the advantage that we have with the ADA, but there are still things that we could use to make our lives better. But I just want people to know that, the ADA, it just gives us, a way to be a part of the community. And that's what we're asking. We don't want special treatment. We don't want, we don't want to be preferential treatment just because we want it. We want, equal treatment under the ADA, just so we can be a part of the community like everyone else.
Yeah, well said. Where can our listeners go to get in touch with you or learn more about you?
They can go to my website. It is ccdcprobatepower.com. And on there, they can find my contact information, my phone number, and my email.
Great. Are there any other questions that we didn't ask you or anything else you want to say to our listeners before we wrap up today?
I just wanted to say, I hope people, understand the importance of the ADA and how it has opened doors for people with disabilities, because disability could happen to anybody at any time. It happened to me as an 18-year-old college student, and it could come about when you least expect it. And so it's the ADA, it protects all of us, because at any time that could happen. So I think it's important for people to know about it and to learn about it.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Chris.
All right. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Adventures in Accessibility. Tune in next time for another dive into the unknown.
Adventures in Accessibility is hosted and produced by Emily Schumann, and our sound engineer is Jessica Lucania. This podcast is a project of the Rocky Mountain ADA Center and is funded under a grant from the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. Grant number 90DP0094-01-00. This production is intended solely for entertainment and informal guidance and should not be considered legal advice. The opinions expressed by guests are not necessarily held or endorsed by the Rocky Mountain ADA Center.